back to Wrist Check Podcast, episode 38. The gang's back together again, minus one.
Yes.
My name is Perry.
I'm Rashawn.
And we make up the Wrist Check Podcast, minus Ben. He's not here tonight. He's traveling. Took a little trip to get a tattoo. When you live this lifestyle, that's the kind of things you do, apparently.
Shout out to Frank William.
Shout out to Frank. Ben went to Texas to go get tatted by Frank. Frank, who's been on the show.
Yes.
And we'll be reunited with our partner in crime tomorrow.
Yes.
But tonight, we have a special guest. We have two. We have our co-host for this evening. You might recognize him from episode 37, which just premiered last week.
Yes.
Tyler Busher. Welcome back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now you're in the studio.
You're in the studio, so there's no
official.
there's no live round of applause.
Yeah,
but we need to clap you in.
Just push the button.
We're missing 125 people.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
This feels a little scarier. I'm not even gonna lie.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, you're natural. You'll be fine.
Because I see Jenny's face, and now she's like, "Don't say anything crazy."
And tonight we have a special guest on the couch. We have Robin Tallendier.
Yes. Well, congrats for saying my name right.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Founder of watch company Atelier Wen.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very happy to be here. Thanks
Welcome.
for the invite, guys.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yes.
Happy to have you. We're going to have some fun this evening. We're going to get into some of your background and the history of this fantastic watch company that's making some waves and getting out there. But first, it will be a wrist check podcast without an honorary wrist check.
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the man who never repeats a watch.
Oh, man. I will kick it off. You know something? I have to say, there's been a lot of pressure on me for not repeating a watch. But I acquired a few timepieces that I actually love and appreciate, and I actually want to repeat. Now, this is what I will say, because there is method to my madness. Same watch, different strap.
Okay.
I am wearing the Rolex Cellini.
Yes.
From the early 2000s. Of course, you guys know, two-tone precious metal. So this is not steel.
Mm-hmm.
White gold case, rose gold bezel, rose gold indices.
So let me just interject real quick.
Please.
Okay. So this piece, you did repeat it, but
yes,
not everyone saw it.
Not everyone saw.
Because that episode is on Patreon.
Oh, yes. So this is kind of like a new watch for the folks that have not subscribed. So thank you, Perry, for clearing things up. So I think I can still hold my title.
Sure. For tonight.
The funniest thing is when we were off camera and just like talking with Robin, he asked like, why did I choose this watch? This watch is an oddball. I mean, when Cellinis were available, it was definitely like the last pick of the litter.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've always shared on the show is my love and appreciation for Rolex and what joy it brought me personally, just the connection with my father. And, to answer your question now that we're here, this is a piece that I would love to offer my son on his wedding day.
Sweet.
That's awesome.
I feel like if you get married in a watch, it should be a dress watch.
Sure.
And why not be anything but this?
Two-tone precious metals.
Two-tone precious metal. Rollersaur.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So, I mean, when I picked this up, I just knew it was one of the ones. I knew this was it. It definitely like checks all the boxes that I needed to, and then add in like this patent leather croc and gives like the pop because the case is still mint.
Yeah.
Mm.
So this watch hasn't been polished, although it's 24 years old.
And is it a manual wound movement?
Manual wound, no seconds hand. If I were to use your words, it'd be a magic trick.
Sure. Yeah.
So I love dress watches without seconds hands.
That's a proper dress watch.
Proper dress watch.
But it should be all white gold.
Oh, you think so?
I mean, that's what I've heard. I mean, I just was watching I was watching YouTube. That's all.
Okay.
Well, this is WCP. We break the
we break rules. We break the
we
mold.
break the rules. We break the mold. But I love this watch. I love this watch, and you know, casually wearing it. I mean, I'm wearing boots, like wide-legged jeans, a turtleneck, and a cowboy hat for like guys that are listening.
No, it looks good. Yeah,
but it still works. Like, you know, you would think that you'd be in like a black tie moment or like some kind of cocktail dinner, but it's like, man, I like lasso
it's a
me.
Rolex, wear it.
Yes,
Wear
lasso
it in
me
good
some cattle.
I think
Lasso
that's an everyday watch.
Yes,
Definitely.
I think a Rolex dress watch should be an everyday watch. And even that, because I've seen it on the original band,
Yes,
this strap makes it look like a totally different watch.
yes,
It's amazing.
100%.
It's great.
100%.
It's good.
I love it.
Thank you guys.
Tyler, what do you got for us?
I am the man who always repeats a watch.
Okay.
It's the same watch from the last episode, the Ikepod Chronopod 003.
Watch so nice you wore it twice, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I love it.
Yes.
And, yeah. I love it. I mean, it makes me feel happy every time I see it. It's like a UFO, and I'm into that. I've said it last time, so you can go look.
It's very silky on the hands too. The case feels
It
nice.
is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't move. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like I'm wearing anything. It's heavy,
Yeah.
Mhm,
but it
is.
doesn't
It's
feel like
not a
I'm
light
wearing
watch.
anything. It's just like,
It's all the shape.
yeah.
Yeah. The design too makes it like very luxe. It just you can't tell what it is. It is like a UFO to that point. But when you look at the craftsmanship, but like the simplicity, it's like, actually, I should ask what that is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like the reaction you get when you see it. It's like, I should ask what that is.
And we talked about this before in the last episode. So this watch, though no longer owned by Mark Newson, this company, was originally designed by him and in many ways resembles the Apple Watch, which he's also partly responsible for that design. But you also have a strap that is very, very similar to the Apple Watch strap.
The only difference is
It has a buckle.
Yeah.
It has a tank buckle,
Yeah. But they do sell the original straps, vintage straps on the website. This is not a plug, but to me, that makes it that original strap. And I think the only thing that makes me feel any different about it is the buckle.
Yeah.
That's a cool. It also too, like, speaking to the strap, it has like this integrated part that like
it goes in.
It goes in.
But
You
that's
can't
Apple
tell.
Watch. That was the whole good thing about the original Apple Watches, that it felt like it was part of the watch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While still being like super sporty.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I'm wearing a new watch tonight.
Yes.
I'm wearing Seiko Kosuke Kawamura. Kosuke Kawamura is a Japanese artist. He is a collage artist. And we had caught wind of this piece getting released in the summer. I think it was August. It was like early August. And I saw it on Instagram and I was like, I have to figure out where to get this watch from.
Yes.
Because it was a limited edition.
Yes.
They made 3,000 pieces, so quite a few.
Yes.
So I knew I had a fairly good chance at getting one. But the reason why I really wanted this, there was another Seiko I was after, the Time Sonar, which I absolutely love. And it had this, similar to this one, it had this like clear see-through dial where you could see the date wheel and you could see the actual date and then the kanji date wheel. And I thought that watch was awesome. And so when I saw this one come out, I realized that the connection between this and that was that Kosuke was drawing inspiration from several of his favorite Seiko pieces and combining them on one watch, much like he does with his art. And one of those references was the Time Sonar. So when I realized that they combined both dial colors into one watch,
wow,
I was like, man, I got to get this. And a gentleman by the name of Derek Mon,
shout out to the Minute Mon.
You might know him on Instagram as the Minute Mon.
Yes, sir.
Who is owner of Caraco in Queens.
Yes.
Is a big Seiko collector himself, deals in Grand Seiko and Seiko. And we reached out to him and he was able to to hold one for us, and I was able to acquire this watch.
Yes. And
I'm very, very happy with it. I did take it off the bracelet. I found a NATO strap that is sporty enough, but still the colors kind of go back to the dial. Mm-hmm. Just makes it fun for me. It makes the watch feel a little more 90s.
I was gonna say, like, it reminds me of like a 90s New York Knicks jersey.
Well, that's good. That's kind of what I was going for, because the Time Sono, I think, was like maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Yes.
And so the strap brings me back to that.
That's when we were good.
Yeah, seriously. Yes. Facts.
Sad to say.
But no, I've been having a lot of fun with this piece and really, really enjoying it. It's not every day that I find a Seiko that makes me smile. I feel like everyone has at least one.
Yes.
This one is mine. So I'm really, really enjoying this.
For sure.
Robin.
Yes. So,
the man of the hour.
The man of the hour, but actually I've been repeating for the past few months.
Sure.
So, yeah. So I mean, I'm committing more sins than you. Sorry. So I'm wearing actually a prototype of a latest series, which is called Perception.
Yes.
But this one is a bit different because it's actually the latest prototype, and I just had it last Friday. So that was 2 days ago, and it's sort of the first time I'm wearing it. The particularity of that watch is that you have a handmade guilloche dial by the only guy in the whole of China and also whole of Asia to do like handmade guilloche. Yeah, that's what makes it hard for us to do it. Mm-hmm. Also, what makes it so pretty, because you have this very sort of intricate like depth effect, and it's really nice. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm wearing today.
Of course.
Pro Perception.
I wouldn't expect you to come any different.
No, that would have been a bit weird. Like, I mean, actually, I thought a bit about it because I took another watch with me. So I was like, like maybe I should wear something else. No, not to be like that cliche. But yeah, in the end, like that. Yeah, I think my co-founder would kill me if I were wearing something else.
Sure.
Like my watch, so, yeah.
We're here to talk about Atelier Wen.
Yep.
So it's only right. So getting right into it, I got a question for you.
Sure.
It's one thing, you're surrounded by people who love design, objects, wristwatches, etc. And so we're all very passionate about things.
Yep.
And so it's one thing to love a watch. It's another thing to start a watch company.
Yeah.
How did this come about? How did you make this transition?
I think it's a bit like what we were discussing beforehand. It doesn't like you don't take the decision to make the transition happen. It's just like just go with the flow and it happens. So the way it actually happened, like for me, is that I've always been into Chinese watches, because when I started collecting, I was 14 years old, and it's like my parents gave me a quartz Seiko chronograph for my 14th birthday. I got hooked. Very soon I wanted a mechanical watch, but at 14 you don't have the budget to buy a Tissot or Hamilton. And online I saw that for like 15-20 euros you could get like automatic watches from China. So yeah, that's how I got into Chinese watches. I got more and more, and I was really passionate about it. And like when I was in uni in my third year, I went to like study abroad in Beijing. And I befriended another guy from my course who was also very much into like Chinese things. And then when we both went back to the UK, all our friends had graduated because they didn't do year abroad. So we were like alone and a bit bored. And then, we sort of like started thinking like, well, why don't we do something together? Why don't we do something that relates to like Chinese culture? But back then it was just a sort of experiment. It was really like something to fill in like the boredom. So we were just thinking like, we should do it like that. That should be the concept. We should be making watches. And at some point we thought we'd be doing like sort of like leather accessories. I could have been leather accessories, and maybe I could be making belts today, but no, we went for watches, but it was purely a sort of experiment. And then like my friend and partner went to like do his masters in Beijing, and we sort of like took it a bit further. We were like, why don't we look for designers? So we looked for designers. Why don't we actually do designs? So we did designs. Then why don't we start doing prototypes? We did prototypes. And then it's like we had both finished our studies and we had working prototypes. And we were like, you know what? I mean, at this stage, why don't we just try to launch this thing, see how it goes? Worst case, no one wants to buy it. We just go to like full-time, like regular jobs, like all our classmates were doing. And so we launched it. And I mean, to our amazement, like people bought it and we're like, let's do that. Let's do that. And also so we did that Kickstarter, and I think we raised around like 80,000 US, which for us back then, we felt like we were billionaires. We're like, it's like, let's do it. So we both moved to Hong Kong to be close to our suppliers, to also be close to the Chinese market, because back then we thought it'd be a big thing. And then, like, without knowing, we were running a watch company.
Wow.
That's how it happened.
So, Robin, I have a question for you, because so we have a tie to like fashion, hip hop, and pop culture and things like this. So, like, when I think of like China, I'm thinking like Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
You know, I always have like some fun analogy. So, like, of course, like, you know, let's say, for example, to Wu-Tang, like their albums, it was always like Chinese, like Kung Fu movies. I know for sure, like my dad, we grew up in the 90s where, like, you know, your dad watched Chinese Kung Fu movies. What was it for you, especially, you know, because you're relatively a young guy? What was it about China? Because you did do your studies and everything there, but like, what was it about China? What specific moment where you was like, I want to go into Chinese design?
You know, it's weird, but actually for me, the interest in China started with watches. It was more like I got my first Chinese watches, and I don't know, I kind of became curious about that. And then I was like, why not taking like Chinese classes? So in high school, I took like Chinese classes, and then like I got sent to like a Chinese high school for like a few months, and I just loved it. I was like, oh, it's actually, it's really nice. And then like, because of the watches, I got into Chinese culture. And then like when I was in my last year of high school, I was like, I have this one goal for when I go to uni, is to spend like 1 year in Peking University. So I chose my university based on that. But really for me, like the attraction to Chinese culture was the watches. As to then, like when we were designing the watches, I think what we really wanted to show is that like there's more than the stereotypes. Because I don't know how it is here. I mean, you can hear from my accent, but I come from France. But it's like, at least in France, you know, people were like, oh, China is just a bunch of dragons and red and gold. And for them, that was Chinese aesthetics. But what I saw there, it was like widely different. So I was like, I mean, I want to show that it's not just about like the sort of like stereotypical understanding that one may have, but it's actually like much more rich. But actually, it's super difficult because you're asking yourself, like, you know, what is modern Chinese style, especially in watches? And turns out that there's no answer to that. So you sort of have to at least provide an answer yourself. It's really great because there's like huge creative freedom. Like you can do pretty much anything, but it's also tough because it's not like, I don't know, if you're doing watches in Switzerland and you want to do like a Swiss type of watches, you know, you have like very, very important like historical figures, and that's like you see the trend, you see how is the design language. Like modern Chinese style, like there's no such thing. So a lot of creative freedom. And I think what we sought to do was to kind of go back to like pure like design concepts, and then try to apply them to the watch format. But it's hard because you don't want to be figurative, you don't want to be like sort of like too direct, you don't want to just put Chinese characters on your dial. But at the same time, you want to reinterpret those like concepts and be it understandable for people.
Very true. It's weird too, because if you think about it, let's just say if you tap into like watches in general, yes, there are like Chinese watch brands, but I don't necessarily see them as having like a design language. It does adapt from some other culture other than like its own.
Well, I think definitely. The thing is too, right? We forget sometimes how large that country is. Right? Like China is an extremely large country with an amazing, rich history in all art forms. I mean, some of the most talented artisans come from China.
Yes.
You're talking about painters, you were studying Chinese sculpture, you know, musicians, you know, writers, And, I think about, even chefs, like people who are involved in the culinary arts.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you call the brand, and this is a really good segue to it, right? The brand is called Atelier Wen. And when I think about the word atelier, I think an artist studio. I think artisan. I think someone who has probably started as an apprentice and become a master craftsman of sort. Where does the name Wen fit in with Atelier Wen?
Yeah, of course. So Wen is like the Chinese word for culture.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And I think it's like, you're very right. Like the atelier is a place where like you were an apprentice and then like you're learning, you're growing. It's not sort of like the master temple. It's not the factory. It's really a place where there's a journey. And we felt it resonated well with us because at the beginning, we sort of also knew that we didn't know that much. And we would learn like so much more along the journey as to like what this like Chinese like style, Chinese like aesthetics applied to watches could be. But I think also the reason why we chose Atelier is, we hesitated quite a bit. At some point we thought, we want to do Chinese watches. Why don't we have a full Chinese name? But then we looked at us and we were like, oh, but actually we're like two French guys. Like that'd be a bit like dishonest. And we're not Chinese. My partner, he was born in Hong Kong. He grew up in Hong Kong. He speaks Chinese like a local. But still like he's like of French parents. He also lived a bit in France. So we thought like the name would need to reflect who we are. Like, so that's why we had like also this like French part of the name. So we're like two French guys, really passionate about Chinese culture. And that's awesome. Really want to like celebrate that and show it to the world, like kind of like make it accessible to everyone.
Oh, I love
hence
that.
Both French and Chinese.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one of your first releases is the Porcelain Odyssey.
Yep.
Which is a beautiful timepiece and was incredibly popular. The question I ask that I have is, you make this endeavor to start a watch company, and which are in a foreign country for yourself, as a person who is sort of, I guess, enamored with the culture and the arts in this country. And how do you then determine what's the first product you're going to release to enter the market? Like, I'm curious, like, how did that come about? Because starting a watch company, I imagine, is already like incredibly scary. And then like deciding what the first point of entry is going to be with respect to product design and everything that comes with that. How did this come about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think like very early on in the journey, we identified that it'd be great to have like some aspect of craft, because we were thinking about what does like made in China stand for in people's mind, and unfortunately to lots of people like it has pretty much a bad image. But still, like, pretty much also everyone knows that China is like very like well known for the craft, like especially in its like history. So we very early on were like, okay, we need to have that bit of like the image of made in China. We need to have some craft. So so we knew that. Then as to why porcelain, actually that came second. Like first of all, like when we were designing Porcelain Odyssey, the sort of like driving question for us was that if we were to go back to the roots of modern Chinese watchmaking and redo everything today, what would that watch look like? And modern Chinese watchmaking started in 1955. That's when they made the first like wristwatch, and that watch was actually like based on an existing, funny enough, French watch. And so the aesthetic was actually like very Western European. And then like for the decades to come, like pretty much all watches made in China like had this like very sort of like 1950s European aesthetics. So we're like, okay, let's go to that. Let's start from this. And then like how can we make it more modern and be like with our goal of having like some craft. And we went through different options. We thought about doing like enamel and cloisonné, but that was like prohibitively expensive. We thought about other stuff like lacquer. Actually, for a long time, we thought, okay, we're gonna do lacquer because lacquer is really pretty. But turns out that from sort of like pure like feasibility point of view, like porcelain was sort of like the easiest to start with. And also we felt like in terms of like look of the end product, it would also be kind of like stronger because, you know, like lots of people know that you have this very typical Chinese style, like white and blue, it's in quartz. So we were like, yeah, it's going to be more durable. People are going to recognize it more. It fits in perfectly with the initial design aesthetics we want to follow. So yeah, that's how we got to porcelain.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I was going to ask, because speaking to design, and then we got into like the dials, right? And you're talking about like your cost, being a startup, kind of figuring out what makes sense. Because if you think about enamel, the process seems simple, but to kind of get the finished product, like you're losing maybe 70 to 80% of
crazy.
what you
like
invested in.
Or when you're creating enamel dials.
When you're creating enamel dials.
The scrap rate is so high.
So with your design language and your specialty in hand finished guilloche, in the beginning, I thought, I was like, man, like, because your price points are very, very, I want to use the right word. I want to say it's
inexpensive.
It's inexpensive, but it's also like, it's very luxe. It's attainable
because it's not inexpensive in terms of quality.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't want to do cheap.
So how do you cut your costs?
It's inexpensive in terms of like your retail price point. The amount of watch that you're getting, for the price point that you guys charge is amazing.
Thank you.
Because hand guilloche from anyone, Patek, Jesus Christ. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about like that kind of artwork. It's in like, you know, the 6, 7, 8 of figures. Like it's just like out of the spectrum. And so it's like,
I just want to be clear too. The watch that Rashawn is talking about now is the watch that is on
that I'm wearing.
And this is the Perception.
Yep.
Which is the latest offering from Atelier Wen that you're just still taking pre-orders for now, right? You're scheduled to deliver in November.
Yeah, I mean, it's close, the pre-orders, but they're all going to be delivered like late November. Yeah.
So pre-orders are done.
Yeah,
you can no longer order this watch.
Yeah, no, but actually it's really complex. I mean, we're going to be making some more, but because it's handmade, the dial, you know, we can only make that many. So, and I don't want people to wait like 2 years before they receive their watches. So yeah, no, that's done for now. Okay. But hopefully, next year we'll be releasing some extra ones. But in regards to your points about like having this sort of like value prop, we also felt it was a bit necessary because, I mean, we're coming out of nowhere. We have no credibility. We have no track record, and you have guys who've been there for so long. So we're like, I mean, let's offer like, you know, like something more. Let's make it so that, hey, they're gonna notice and they'll be like, wow, it's actually a good watch for the price. Like besides the design, besides the story, there's actually like a strong value behind it. So that's where that's what we're trying to do. And yeah, I mean, as you were saying, like guilloche is super expensive. I think the sort of like most affordable like Swiss ones before, it was like from Louis Erard. There was around like 4 something K Swiss franc. Otherwise Lane, which starts at like 11. Yes. So yeah, it's tough. It's like purely handmade. So yeah.
So then also too, like a 2-part question as far as design, because I think, you know, where your DNA is in like your dial choice and like, you know, the efforts that you put into it. And I think when you see a timepiece, it is always the dial. You know, for those who aren't as like, you know, familiar with watches, you always say the face. So it's like the face of the watch is like what attracts people. But then you have like this beautiful integrated bracelet and this kind of like, you know, weird like octagonal but like geometrical kind of shape. And like, you know, there's so many brands that you can say it reference to, but it still has like its own distinctness. You said that there was a bit of a French like influence a bit, like as far as like Chinese design when it came to timepieces. Was that a little bit of like what you guys were thinking, or like what was that specific brand?
Yeah, I think for this one, Yeah, that's like something we got asked a bit, because I mean, definitely it has this sort of like still integrated sport chic like aesthetic. Some people are like, oh, it's genta design. Oh, it's a bit like AP. It's a bit like Patek.
Yes.
But to us, it's more like, you know, like so many brands are like doing those kind of like design, like kind of like trends. So much that it became a genre, like it became like those kind of like 70s like steel watches, and we wanted that to be our take on this new genre. So I mean, I completely agree on the fact that this genre was like mostly European, so not Chinese. So that's where maybe like the bit of like European like influence come from. But then we really try to like make it like align with the brand DNA. So you look at the case, I mean, yeah, it may remind you of some of the brands, but what we are trying to do is like you have this sort of like, it mimics the shape of a pagoda roof. And you see it both ways. So it's like not flat, it is like angled, like a roof again. And there's like lots of like small points that are reminiscent of like very like key like Chinese like design like aesthetic trends. Yeah,
I agree. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you guys are making a conscious effort to integrate sort of Chinese heritage into the watches. As two French guys with the Chinese watch company, what's the response been like in the country? What's the response been like in China?
I think the country is very big, so it's hard to like.
Well, in the cities where you have like.
I think like it's like in Hong Kong we got like really good response, and Hong Kong became like one of the places where we have like one of the biggest communities. So that it's been great.
And in Hong Kong, I want to outline too. There is a big watch community.
Yeah,
it's
a big watch community, and I guess the advantage of Hong Kong is that it's very concentrated because it's so small. And there's many people, and many of them like watches.
Yes.
It's sort of like easier as well, like to convey your message, because you just be in one place, and that's enough. In mainland China, actually, to be fully transparent with you, it's been like tougher. So we first tried actually to launch the brand in mainland China in 2019, and that didn't go that well. There are a few reasons for that. The first one was that we realized that the cost of marketing is much higher over there. Very simply speaking, like the cost of visibility is higher and conversion rates are lower. So you need a very big budget if you really want to get a lot of visibility. Then retail is still super important in China, especially like above like a certain price point, and that price point is very low. And China is not one country where you have like 80% of the demand concentrated in one place. It's pretty much all like spread over the tier 1 and tier 2 cities. So if you want to do it properly, you need to have like 15 points of sales, which is expensive.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I feel like all those like Western brands did really good marketing jobs there. So it's like, yeah, it's hard like to come up with the idea that, okay, it's a Chinese product, but it's as good as like the Swiss ones, the German ones, and so on. So that's an extra difficulty. But then we changed a bit, because when we were selling like the first series, we really had sort of like boiling the ocean like way of like trying to sell it. So we were like, okay, that's how is the country. We're gonna target those medias. We're gonna be on those forums. We're gonna do this and that and that. A bit like, you know, like a funnel path. Like you start very wide, and then you hope that you end up with like a few qualified people. That didn't go so well. So then what we did instead is that, because we still had Chinese customers, so we looked at who they were, we identified them, we reached out to them, and then we're like, oh, you know what, we can like lend you like a prototype. Why don't you just like wear it around, show it to your friends, bring it to meetups? And it turns out that this worked so much better, because those people they were meeting were like similar to them, and therefore they reacted like quite similarly to the watches, and yeah, so we were able to like move more following this strategy. Also, the thing with China is that it's such a diverse country that it's hard to, you know, I mean, you'll find like really, really like a lot of personals, a lot of behaviors. So it's hard to to think of it as like one unified market. Actually, it's loads and loads and loads of like different like pockets and stratums. So you may be successful with one segment and not so much with another one. You just need to really like identify who is it that you're gonna resonate with.
Gotcha. You had a question?
So outside of that, I always think about everything before. How hard was it on your journey to find proper manufacturing, proper artisans to actually create the watches?
Actually, that wasn't that hard. And I was a bit lucky in the sense that, so as I was like telling you guys, so I started collecting Chinese watches at age 14, and I very quickly bought a lot. But you know, like vintage Chinese watches, back in the days, like you could buy them for like 10 US for one. And I was lucky because with my family, we were going to China quite frequently. So I just bought loads and loads and loads. And I was talking about them online on forums. And it was a time where like few people like were talking about those in English. So I befriended, I think, like the few people who were talking about that. And one summer, actually in Beijing, like I just stumbled upon one of the guys that was chatting like online. But it was pure coincidence. And the guy was like Canadian and he was on holiday, and we just like met in a like really random shop. And you know, I mean, I think I had more chance of winning the lottery. But still, and this guy was like super connected, like with everyone in China. So he introduced me to a guy who was sort of like the head of like the Chinese Chamber of Watchmaking, and I clicked very well with him. And then the next year I came back to do like my year of study abroad. And he basically took me under his wing, and for 1 year he showed me around like all the movement manufacturers, like all the good suppliers, the watchmakers, the artists, the designers, the design teachers, the watchmaking teachers, the retailers. So after that year, I sort of knew, okay, if one day I want to make a watch, I know exactly with whom I want to work. Like it's gonna be like those guys.
So it wasn't.
So that helped a lot. Yeah, actually, like this bit was sort of like sorted out. So then, you know, when we were doing the design, what we did is that we just called like the like design teacher friend, and we asked her like, okay, do you know any good watch designers? And she recommended some people, and we got them. And then like movement, okay, those guys, case, those guys, hands, those guys. So that was like sort of relatively more straightforward.
Wow.
I'm curious. You know, you had mentioned some of the challenges that you've experienced in some areas in China. What's a company that is doing exceptionally well in that marketplace? What is it that is calling the majority of like the Chinese population's attention in some of those points?
You mean like in regards to like watches?
Like other brands? Yeah. Like what is it that?
What do like Chinese people buy as watches?
Yeah, what do they like other than like Rolex? I know Rolex is, you know, a behemoth everywhere.
Rolex, I think it's kind of like, I mean, the brands that are successful here
are successful
also successful in China. Like, so Rolex is really big. AP is doing a tremendous job. Patek has always been the sort of like gold standard. Like you really see that.
So the luxury market has a lot of similarities there.
Definitely. And I mean, if you may give some credits to those brands that are really good at marketing and they really like cornered the market. Then if you look at, I mean, the story is a bit more different. If you look at sort of like the very accessible ends of the market, there you have like a lot of local brands, but they don't really appeal to like sort of like watch collector audiences. You know, it's more like fashion watches or so no watch collectors, like no special like watchmaking appeal, more like design driven, very mass, like distributed in like malls and like big supermarkets, big stores. But otherwise, for the big brands, it's mostly like Western brands. Actually, that's also one of the reasons why we started that, because we thought, okay, so you know, like all the Swiss and German brands, they at least have some parts made in China. Yeah. Because anyway, the Swiss laws are just so permissive that you can have anything made anywhere, and it's super easy to have your watch like qualifying for Swiss made. The talent is there. You have really dedicated people, really skilled people, really, I mean, amazing people, but still, like, how come you don't have any, like, sort of, like, very recognized Chinese watch brand? How come you don't have an aspirational one? How come you don't have, like, a Chinese Rolex?
So I was going to ask you, too, because in the West, at least here in America, unfairly, Chinese manufacturing is associated with
counterfeit.
Not well, there's that, but I think just in general, questionable quality, which I think is incredibly unfair.
It is.
But what is Atelier Wen doing to sort of combat that in the West?
Yeah, no, fair. So I think for us, the main way we're combating it is by making like super high quality Chinese watches that are sold more or less the same price as the Swiss brands or German brands or any other brands, like, like at the same price of any like super high quality like watches, regardless of where they come from. And yeah, for us, like by doing that, by showing that, hey, okay, that's a Chinese watch, but before anything, that's a great watch. And okay, it comes from China. We hope that this way, we can show people that, well, made in China is not at all like counterfeit and like shoddy goods. I mean, that there's really like some super high quality, both in terms of manufacturing, but also creativity that come from the country. And I think this image comes a lot from the fact that everything is made in China. You have like the very low end to the very high end. At the end of the day, it's more like a matter of budget. Like, what are you willing to put to make your watches? I mean, of course, if you want to make a $20 watch, it's going to be like a $20 quality.
Sure.
There's no magic happening here. But still, like, that kind of like then clutters the mind, and people then associate made in China with that. Whereas you can make pretty much anything in the country. And if you look at the history, I mean, they were the OGs of craftsmanship, like all like the enamel, the porcelains, and so many more. I mean, they've been making that for centuries, if not thousands of years. So there's definitely like a real know-how of real craftsmanship and real talent. So I wish people like see this more rather than just like focus on like a small subset.
Sure. Well, what's interesting too is, so, this came about, I hadn't heard about the brand up until recently, via a friend of ours and a friend of the podcast.
Yes.
Who's a heavy watch collector. Shout out to our homie Aaron, who plugged us with you guys. And, Aaron's one of these people who, when he talks about a brand and he's excited, you listen.
Yes.
And so I imagine that you guys are moving into a space where you're having some success with American consumers. Are you finding that more American customers and collectors are opening up to the idea of collecting a Chinese made watch?
But it's funny because I mean, from the beginning, where we had our largest community was always the USA, and I mean, I never thought this would happen because maybe it was very like shallow of me, but you look at the sort of macro environment and you see that, I mean, US like Chinese relations are not that good. China maybe doesn't have a really good image, like in sort of like the overall like US. So I never thought like American people like would buy like our watches this much. But then like talking with some of our customers who then became friends, it seems to me that, I don't know, maybe people here are like more open to new concepts, and they are like more willing to just try something new, like whatever that is. So I think that's one of the big reasons why we had like a big like American community.
Well, so when I was listening to you, I think the biggest takeaway is the fact that we are open to other ideas. Whereas like I think in China they are very traditional and like kind of stick to the guns. I think you do have to earn that kind of trust for that kind of community. And when you were explaining just like your success and your challenges and things like this, like I think about the times when I'm up at 3 a.m. and I want to purchase a watch.
This happens fairly often.
It happens fairly often.
You're speaking to a guy who owns like 60 watches.
Damn.
So now, but to this point, now this is the thing, and why I feel like everything is so relative is because Perry is someone who's very studious, and like he's a guy that would DM me about the brand. And I'd be like, I'm going to buy that. Atelier Wen. Like, he'd be like, yo, what do you think about this? And like, this is hot.
I'm going
to buy it. And I think in America, there are a lot of enthusiasts and people that actually like, it doesn't matter what's on your wrist. In a lot of communities. And I think there was a certain time where we believed that you had to have a certain watch in order to have a conversation. But, I think brands like Seiko, Undone, or like any of those Japanese brands that kind of like taper off, even like something like the Electricians where like it's just this kind of like weird and obscure thing and you really don't understand it. There's someone in America that does.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of it. It's like, there can be, I don't know, I like the fact that people here can be very open. And I mean, I don't know, they're very open about getting excited about anything as long as it's interesting. There's like sort of like no like previous judgment. It's like, if it's cool, whatever that may be, maybe like someone will get excited about it. And this is really nice. Like this is what I like about also like our communities here. Is that, they can get excited about it. It's not like, I don't know, I look at France, for instance, where I come from. It's like, I mean, I feel like in terms of like, maybe like image of China is the same situation. The country has a pretty bad image, but then people like stick to it and they're like, no, I won't buy a made in China watch. And you're like, oh, but look, it's like handmade guilloche. It's this guy, it's very special design. It's 904 steel. It's very specific movement. We did this reason, I mean, A, B, C, D, whatever. And they are still, no, it's made in China, I don't buy it.
Yes.
But here I feel it's like, you said that and you're like, oh, you know what, it's cool.
Yes.
Yeah, let me have a look. And that is nicer.
That is very true.
I think you met the right people here.
Yes. Yes. So did you intend to kind of like impact the US market?
Oh, not at all. Like when I started it, I was absolutely clueless. I was like, I don't know. The thing is that I just thought, okay, I met all these people in China. They are really extremely talented. They are really passionate. And what really moves me is that for a lot of them, like their job was their life. You would meet those watchmakers and they love their job so much that they would like live and breathe it. And then like when I go back to France or the UK, people will be like, oh no, made in China is like those kids in like sweatshops. Stop your bullshit. And it hurts a bit. You're like, oh, but it's not how it is. And it's really not how it is. So then that's why I started it. But like never, I mean, I didn't have the US like in my mind. Like, I think, when I started, I was really clueless and a bit reckless. I just thought I need to make like really high quality Chinese watches to show them that it's not what they think. Then it's just sort of like organically happened.
But it's perception of how we see factories and manufacturing. It's like I think it comes with the people, like a lot of our favorite brands make stuff in China.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't start with made in China. It starts with the creative person. Are you trying to make a quick buck or are you trying to have a legacy? And I think that's what it is, because Bonq always tells me like there's places, because we do like clothes and stuff, and it's places that you can make quality stuff.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere.
Yes.
But it's who's selling this stuff.
Yes.
Are you trying to cut corners? And it's just like, we like a lot of well-designed clothes and we pay good money for these clothes. And a lot of those clothes are made in China, but they're made by master craftsmen.
And that's a conversation that doesn't happen enough. And we're privy to this because of our backgrounds in fashion and manufacturing. There are places in China where, you take like, one of our favorite brands, like a Double RL, and the hand knit linen cashmere sweaters that we get, and the intricacy and how it's woven, and literally talk to craftspeople who make these watches, and then designers who will tell you there's no one in America that can make this.
Yes. That's true.
They don't exist here anymore.
Yes.
And they can't do it of that quality.
Yes.
And the people who are making it are paid well. They're artisans who command a certain value.
Yes.
But they can still make it for us at an affordable price. We're talking about a $1,400, $1,800 sweater that if you make it here, it's not going to look as good, but it's also going to be 3 times the price.
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's funny because you use the word perception, and that's the name of the watch.
Wow.
Yes.
Serendipity.
And we're talking
Yes,
about craftsmanship. And one of the things I wanted to get to is, when you hold this watch, you touch it and you play with it and you're looking at it, this thing really is beautiful.
Thank you.
And it is, it's very easy for someone to assume that the dial would be made on like a CNC machine or something. But you're producing these dials, which you just showed us, on what's called a rose machine.
Yes. That's beautiful.
And this is not an easy machine to operate.
No.
This is someone who has to be very, very skilled. It's a laborious process. They have to have an amazing eye. They have to have very steady hands.
Yeah.
The machine uses no electricity.
No.
Where did you find someone?
Yeah. Actually,
and how did you convince him to make all these dials for you?
You know, it's a funny story because there's only one such guy in China and only one such guy in Asia. I mean, it's the same guy. But at the beginning, we wanted to do CNC because we had no idea like we'd ever be able to do like real guilloche.
Right.
But even CNC is hard to find because it's not just you put your thing in a machine and call it a day. I mean, because with CNC guilloche, actually, what they aim to do is to replicate the real thing with a guilloche.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So actually, there's a CNC which is engraving, and you need to have like human control. It takes time. But anyway, we couldn't find anyone in China who's able to do that. And then, like through some friends, like I don't know, we talked to. There's this guy in Beijing who is quite connected to like the arts and crafts scenes, but who, for whatever reasons, really can't stand us. So we asked him, and he's like, because we asked him for like CNC, and he was like, but CNC is really shitty. No one does it. And anyway, you guys are so shitty. The only real thing is real guilloche. And I know the only one in China who does it, but he will never want to work with you because your brand is really lame.
Oh, wow.
No.
And then we asked him like, but can you at least give us like his contact number? He's like, yeah, but it's useless. He's not even going to reply to you. So he gave us the contact number. Then we reached out to the guy, and the guy was like, oh, hell yes, let's do it.
Wow.
It's just, I don't know why this guy in Beijing really cannot stand us. Like, I never understood
This
why,
gentleman probably told him no on something, so he's just like, he'll never work with you.
Yeah.
Maybe. but yeah, so that's how we found him. I don't know. This man, like, who does our guilloche is a bit of like a special character, because it's so odd that he started doing guilloche. He has like he was born in a rural area, like in Henan province, very poor family. He sucked at school, so at 14 they sent him to the outskirts of Beijing to work factory jobs because he was just so bad.
Guilloche.
No, he didn't even pick up guilloche then. He was just like working odd jobs, like factories. And then like he started doing an apprenticeship in like precision machinery. But it took him like more than 10 years to finish the apprenticeship. And finally, when he was in his 30s, he had like somewhat of a decent job, a flat. He was starting to build a family. Like his life was finally starting to settle. And then like a friend of his like visited him and showed him an old like Russian like guilloche cigarette box, like from like the Tsar era. And something happened in his head. He just found the thing like extremely pretty. And from one day to another, he left everything to start doing guilloche. So he went back to Henan province. He found like a cave where there used to be a factory, but this one was abandoned. So he put his atelier there because he thought there would be no vibrations. But of course, like you don't get a rose engine like that. I mean, the machines are not being made anymore.
Right.
They don't come up for sales. And the very few times they come up for sale, they stay in Switzerland. They don't go to China. So he wanted to build his own, but he had no idea how. And he didn't even know how to use the internet back then. So for like 3 to 4 years, he started like trying to make a rose engine, and he failed. And finally, after 4 years, like he had like a sort of like semi-working one.
Wow.
But made by himself. And at the end of the day, it was so different from a regular rose engine that he even got a patent for that.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's really like really special. And the way like he sort of got a bit like noticed that I don't know how, but he was like enrolled in some sort of like Chinese like local talent show like on TV, and he won that, and then like suddenly like all the spotlights were on him, and
wow,
yeah,
that's incredible.
But this guy is, I mean, what we like as well is that, I mean, the story is nice, of course.
Sure,
it's you know, it's an old story. It's like it's not something that was meant to happen. Like, how come? Why does he pick up like a very old like European like craft?
Found the only guy in all of the country producing this who just so happened to teach himself and build his own machine.
But no, but that's pretty cool. But what's even cooler is that
he sounds like Tony Stark.
Yeah, it's Iron Man.
But who knows what he's gonna come up with after? But I don't know. What we like is that he doesn't want to remain like a standalone craftsman. He actually wants to inspire other people to do this.
Wow.
He doesn't want just to be an oddity. Like he wants to actually like share that and have like younger craftsmen who pick it up and become guilloche master in their own like rights.
Wow.
So that's what we like as well. So he has some apprentices, and we helped him like build new machines. So now like there's more people sort of like learning the craft, and who knows, maybe in 5, 10, 15 years, there's gonna be like a few like globally recognized like Chinese guilloche master craftsmen. And I mean, that would be really cool, because
that's incredible.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
For sure.
So this watch, feeling the watch, handling the watch, the materials are all very premium. The other striking aspect to me about it is you can feel it's robust. It also feels nice to the hand. It's like very smooth to touch. It's incredibly thin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the movement? Because as I understand it, this is also a Chinese movement.
Yeah. No, everything is made in China. So, and actually, thinness was one of my main concerns, because actually the previous watch, it wasn't that thick. It was like 11 dot something. But because of the way we built the case, it looked thicker. So this one, I really wanted it to be thin, and that like was mainly driven by the movement we're using. Actually, it's a custom made movement. I mean, it's not like fully custom made. You know, it's not as if they made a movement fully for us. But we work with this movement manufacturer in Dandong, which is in the northeast of the country, in Liaoning province. It's actually the border city with North Korea.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's what they are famous for. But for us, it's just the movements, not North Korea, thank God. But yeah, they are one of like the big like Chinese movement makers. Like they are not as big as Seagull. Seagull is the largest player in the country, but they are still pretty big. And recently they came up with a new architecture which is called SL1, which is like much thinner. It's like a single plan movement.
Oh wow!
So not like an ETA where you have like the auto widening module on top, but everything is on like a single plan. And we asked them to do something for us, which would be like a tiny bit thinner, but also like with more power reserve, better accuracy.
What's the power reserve on this?
It's 41. The issue is that
pretty good.
It's kind of standard, but because the movement is so thin, their own calibers come at like 38, and I thought like 38 was really borderline, so we worked to increase that to 41.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also like more precise. So their movements usually leave factories at plus 25, minus 15. I always leave the factory as plus minus 10. Okay. And then of course we like adjust it to 5 positions. So it's below this. Also, it was supposed to be a movement with date, but I don't really like dates. There's no dates. But I didn't want to have like the ghost position, so we removed like the whole thing, so there's only like one position. And
well, I imagine I mean a guilloche die. I don't want to date either.
No, you would completely kill the thing. It's like, because I mean the pattern, you know, the focal point is really the center.
Yes.
And the beauty of it is that you want to create this kind of it's a bit like a well, you know, like a tunnel. Like it needs to go to the center. If you have a date, it just destroys the whole thing.
Yeah.
So no date.
That's agreed for sure. Oh, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
And using 904 steel.
Yeah.
So it's like all premium materials, and you've got you guys like kind of fabricated your own class adjustment system.
Yeah. So that actually was quite a journey. At the beginning, we had actually another design which is a bit more similar to some of the to some of the ones that exist today. So there are not that many watches that have micro adjust. Like IWC does it, Moser does it, Longerson does it, and the Odysseus.
Tudor does it,
yeah. Tudor as well. But we really wanted to have like an on-the-fly one. The reason was that, I don't know, from my personal experience wearing bracelet watch, I thought that the fit was often not right. You know, it was either too loose, and then you had this thing going up and down like continuously, which is really annoying, or if it was too tight, and then like you felt like, I don't know, someone was really kind of like holding your wrist.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have something where we could like just adjust it based on the situation. And initially, yeah, the design was similar to those that exist. But I don't know, then we were not that super satisfied with it. So we just reworked it over the summer. And now it's much better. It's really easy to use. Just need to press that big button.
Yeah.
I agree. When I put it on, I was like, this is extremely easy to get on it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really cool. You know something, and I may be jumping the gun.
No, please go ahead.
But so when you put on and off the watch, I think the highlight when you take it off and like you slide it off your wrist and you kind of turn over and you see the case back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The like this like half division of like, you know, a bit of an exhibition, but then you have the beautiful Chinese lion. And, you know, to your point where you said, hey, like, you know, I understand that there's a bit of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Of course, like people are going to make their connections, and that's just like the way design language works. We all need each other to coexist. But I think something that makes it very unique about this exhibition case back is the fact that, or like this partial exhibition case back, is the fact that, you know, you did stay true to the Chinese like heritage. So like when you see this watch, like at glance, I was like, what is it? And then when you stare at it more, you see it, and it's like kind of like it's like, oh, I love this.
Yeah,
like it
really
kind of
cool.
gives you a bit of like a joy, you know. So it makes sense as to like what your vision is. And I think that you have to be a true enthusiast to appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's like one of those, if you know, you know.
Yeah,
and it's okay if you don't.
Even the outside of the dial, do you see the like the, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah,
it's very subtle.
Oh, like the track.
And even the design, the like the interlocking kind of like.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
yes,
actually,
yes,
the
you
dial.
don't notice it.
That is that's a bit of like, was that supposed to be like the mini track? Is this the mini track?
So actually this pattern is called like rejoined, and it's a pattern that is meant like to bring like good luck and good fortune, and we used it on our first series. So it's funny, like you talk a lot about design language, and that's a question we always ask ourselves is, how do we build our own design language? Like how do we do so that when people see the first series, when people see the second series, they're like, "Oh, that's Atelier Wen," and not just like, "That's nice watch A, that's nice watch B," and no link between them. So we really try like to take some elements from like the first series and to integrate them into there. And one of them was this like pattern, like whole Wen pattern.
But you can't really see it. Like if you're looking right at it, you have to have it up close.
Yes,
and it's just like most people in design would try to go all out and make it right in your face, but it's something that you have to see up close, because I didn't see it until I looked at the actual like dial.
Oh yeah,
and you see it around the dial, and it's just like, oh, okay, I see what you did here. Yeah, I get it. So it's just like I like that aspect.
Thank you.
It's really
Thank
cool.
you. But yeah, and also to go back on your point of like these sort of like locking indexes, I think this is one of the inspirations I like the most, because it's all like driven, like, I mean, at least the dial by Chinese architecture, but we thought they have this ancient like building principle, which is called like sunmao, and it's like mortise and tenons. So they would like sort of like stack elements on top of each other, and there wouldn't be any nail or glue, like just like locking into one another. So we thought to actually build the dial in such a way. And there's 4 different levels of height in the dial. So you have a base, and then like in the base we have this like guilloche, like smaller dials, and then in the guilloche smaller dials the indexes are nesting in, and then in the indexes you have like the elevated chapter ring that sort of like locks into them. So really everything is like piling on top of each other. And for us, it was kind of a good way to get inspired by this old principle and apply it to the watch format.
So you're taking actual principles opposed to just let me put this graphic on.
But that's the difficulty, because it's so easy to be like purely like figurative, like, oh, you put a Chinese character and people will assume it's Chinese. But then the difficulty is how do you translate like core principles into Western format? And I'm not saying we do it right, because you look at our first series, you had Chinese character, not just for the sake of them being there. I mean, it was a reference to an old like time-telling system that actually was from China, but still you had that. So for us, it's also like a continuous challenge as to how can we be less and less figurative and more like, how do we look at the past to really build a modern Chinese style for watches, which is like the challenge, but which is also like what's really exciting, because again, like no one else is doing it. So you're free to give whatever answer you want to that question.
Do you find a challenge in like consumers if it's they don't know the story, they don't know the design elements, they don't understand the principles, and when you tell them, then they're interested? Do you find like a challenge in getting clients that way, or do you get more when you actually explain
that? That's a bit of one, but for us, really because I feel it's like, I don't know, sometimes maybe my understanding of vision of it is wrong, but if it looks nice, if it looks real nice, and if it's thoughtful, you'll attract people's attention, and then you'll be able to tell them the story. So for me, it's always like that. It's like first you attract the attention, and then I'm like, okay, now that I have you, let me explain you why it's that. But I still feel that the difficulty lies on our side, more like, we know where to find inspiration, but how do we actually translate it in a way that's meaningful and purposeful? And that's tough.
Because people always are like, yo, you should explain this, you explain. It's like, why you have to explain it if you made it?
Also too, like I think the toughest part too, and Tyler, I think you can kind of explain to this, because like as creatives, if you don't have like a brick and mortar, or if you don't have like something visual for people to see, so like for what you do and like what you provide to your space and the community and everything, I've seen you work, and I've seen like what you put out, and like you're like, dude, like it's like you just doing this out of like a simple studio, like, or even to your point, it's like you're conveying a message like without like a standalone boutique, like it's impressive. And there are the ones that are gonna know, and when you get to that space where it is to the masses, like the Rolexes, the Pateks of the world, because it's changing of the guards. And you have to be ready for the call. As long as you stay consistent, your time will come. And life is very relative in that, because your story sounds very similar, and I wanted to speak to this, is like your story sounds very similar to a previous guest that we had, as far as like Manny, and how Manny used video games and just met someone on the internet for him to find his passion in being like a pilot. To whereas yourself is like you on the forums, and especially you're on the forums when things weren't popular, where people didn't understand it. You just had like a bunch of guys on the internet just like chatting, and you're like, you could be doing so many other things than that.
No, definitely.
But then you find your passion, in like, what was the odds of you meeting the guy that was then going to change your life?
But definitely, like when I look back at it, it's like pure serendipity. Like, I mean,
you said it.
I think, you said it. But I mean, this guy was on holiday. That's the thing. It's not as if he was Chinese, and we hadn't talked about us being in Beijing at the same time. And it was not even a watch-related shop. It was like a random shop, like a random one in a city where you have like almost 20 million inhabitants, and still like, it's a bit crazy.
Yes.
Yes. And that really made it possible. Otherwise, I would have never met those other people. Maybe I would never had that moment of like realization where I'm like, oh shit, it's really amazing, and people think it's really bad. So let's do something to kind of like fill the gap. No, so yeah,
it's amazing.
So with where you are today, and in terms of like, I know the pre-orders are done on this. We're also nearing the end of 2022.
Yes.
But what does production look like for Atelier Wen? How many pieces are you guys doing annually? What do you think you'll be able to do annually in terms of scale?
The biggest bottleneck, I mean, the only bottleneck really is the dials. All the other components, it's more like industrial suppliers. So if you tell them I want 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 watches, they can do it.
Sure.
They have very good processes.
But our friend cannot pump out 20,000.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like he makes dials. At most, he makes 2 per day.
Yeah.
Now there's one of his disciples that started like making dials. I mean, at the end of the summer, so we can increase a bit the production, but not that many. I don't know if we can make like 500-600 watches. That'd be good. Is that gonna happen? Not sure. I mean, even if I'm being optimistic, I think it's gonna be a bit below that.
Sure.
Then hopefully as well, because the brand is really about the culture, the craftsmanship. Then I mean, I want to explore some of the crafts, so that's one of them. But then hopefully we can also work with other craftsmen simultaneously. I mean, I don't want to just release it and then like retire it. And then, I mean, there needs to be a brand, so there needs to be product that. I mean, as much as possible. Also,
well, I think you have something here. I mean, even just looking at it on your wrist, playing with it, like it's a beautiful watch.
Thanks.
Yes. It really is. What's next with the brand for the brand overall? What's next for Atelier
Wen? We have some cool stuff. We have a chrono version of that.
Of this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But the dial is not certain it's gonna be Guilloche. Maybe it's gonna be another. I mean, at the beginning it was supposed to be Guilloche, and then we thought, there was an initial wow factor with that where people absolutely didn't expect like a Chinese Guilloche watch. Now they expect it because we're doing it. So would the wow factor still be there? Not sure. So we want to find something else that's gonna really surprise people. So we're working on that, but also the movement is gonna be really special. It's not just gonna be a normal movement. It's gonna be like fully hand finished. It's gonna be wonderful. It's really, 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 really gonna look the part. So that's gonna be a super cool watch. Otherwise, we also started working with the oldest actually Chinese watch brand, and we're doing something together. That is gonna be quite fun.
Nice.
And then we have like few other stuff which are still like too preliminary to talk about, but hopefully will be nice.
Exciting.
The goal, I don't know, we have this goal of at some point making our own movement, not because, not for the marketing aspect of it. I think it's a bit useless if you do your own movement just for the sake of making it. That's useless. But because we want to have something that's maybe a bit like higher performance than what's mostly available in China, and with like much higher finishing. So like super high power reserve, very high frequency, and like a real like, I mean, I'm not talking like Voutilainen finishing, but at least like a kind of like luxury, like mass production finishing, like kind of like Rolex finishing for the movement. I think this is something we could achieve. So this is something like we're sort of like also doing the groundwork on those days, and hopefully in 2024 we can have like the first ebosh of that. I hope so.
Incredible. Well, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks a lot.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yes.
You have an amazing story. You have an incredible product.
Thank you so much.
I think that's very, very clear. I know you're going to be in New York sometime, so it's going to be a pretty busy week.
Yep.
For you, you're going to be with some friends of ours at Complecto. Shout out to Jason Gong. So I'm really excited about that because we'll be there as well.
Yes.
And I look forward to seeing more from Atelier Wen. I'm a big fan. If you can squeeze out another watch, I might purchase one.
if you give me your Seiko, we may have a deal.
Oh, okay. We'll see. We'll talk about this after the show. But Robin, it was absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Big shout out to our co-host this evening, Tyler. Back to back.
It's crazy. I wish I could have said some
You're the
crazy
first.
shit on here, but you know.
There's always a first on Rich Trick Pod. You're the first back-to-back co-host.
Yes.
But this was a real treat. For those who are watching, we appreciate you. For those who are listening, for those who are tuning in, you know where to find us. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We are now also on Patreon.
Yes.
Where you can subscribe and pay for exclusive content. Or just choose to support the podcast financially because it costs money to do this.
Yes.
And we've got some more tiers coming out for you all and some more goodies. So please join in on the fun and subscribe.
Yes.
And we will see you all next week.
Yes.
Deuces.
Peace.